each stage. And the model uses this to understand how demand is shifting so that it knows then how to calculate what revenues would come from current or proposed rates. This is a screenshot of the design table that the modeler would be using, where the model will present their current rate structure or their status quo rate, as well as allow them in these tables to design alternatives that they can immediately get feedback on from the indicators to the right on the tables that show how revenue and sales are changing within each customer class that they're modeling. And the calculator I mentioned allows the utility or the modeler to specify different designs within each customer class and let the model know which blocks it should preserve or protect and which blocks it should adjust. So for example, if it wanted to maintain an affordability block, it could do that by letting the model know, don't adjust these blocks, only adjust the higher blocks for revenue sufficiency. The third part of the model deals with uncertainty, and you can think of this in terms of after the financial crisis and the calamity in the banking sector, the Federal Reserve implemented stress tests for the banks, for the major banks in the country. And what they do is they put the banks through a series of scenarios to ensure that their reserves are adequate for worst case outcomes. This model also can be used as a stress testing tool for the sufficiency, reliability of a revenue structure for a utility. And it does this through simulation of demand over either historical or synthetic weather. And it runs a Monte Carlo simulation and forecasts the performance of the rate over a 5-year period. And from this output, you get distributions of revenue and water sales. And from that, you can identify where your risk regions are and how great those risks are and whether you need to implement any policies to manage those risks. Some of the output that the simulation component of the model gives you are, rather than point forecasts of future sales or revenue, rather ranges that reflect the degree of uncertainty. So you can construct confidence intervals for revenue and for sales. So you're able to communicate to your decision makers how much uncertainty is embedded in any given proposal you may be bringing to them. You can also specify revenue targets at 1, 3, and 5-year intervals, and the model will indicate, based on the simulation output, the likelihood of meeting or exceeding those revenue targets. So again, you're getting quick feedback between your current rate and a proposed alternative on how sufficient your system would be and what risks you would be incurring to meet certain revenue targets. The model's fully auditable. All input and output is maintained in the model. All simulation steps are preserved, and they can be stepped through by the user 1 year at a time, or as in shown here, animated, so that you can audit your results. You can also go to the background worksheets and pull out all of the calculations that are in the model, so that this is a principal standard for probability management, that models of this sort need to be open source and auditable, and we've preserved those standards in this model. With that, I'll turn this back to Mary Ann.
You can see from the animations the wide variance of revenue, and this is what we're trying to address. That's the very heart of the problem we're trying to address, is to give financial managers and our water suppliers the ability to cope with those wide swings in a way that will minimize the risk to the utility. So you're probably saying, so are you finished? When do we see all of this? We've been very fortunate. We've gotten funding from the California Water Foundation as well as from other funders for this project. So we have set up a project advisory committee of California finance managers who have been reviewing the work products, both the handbook and the model. And we are now incorporating their feedback, and the handbook and the model will be publicly released in July of 2014. So we wanted to let you know that this is close to being finished and ready to give, to California water agencies for their use, and we'd be happy to come back and talk about the final work product, but I think you get a good sense for what it is we're doing. We'll make sure you all get copies of it when it's distributed. We also took a look at what financial tools were available for managing weather risk. Communities in the Northeast buy snow removal insurance. They budget snow removal if they have a particularly bad winter, and if they haven't budgeted enough, they can be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And they have insurance policies that cover that. So we got to thinking after the first summit, maybe we should look at financial instruments like insurance, like market derivatives, as a way of hedging the weather risk for urban water agencies. So we are preparing a paper, which will also be released in July, that documents what the market opportunities are for this type of strategy. And we think it has particular applicability in California, so we'll be really interested in having you all take a look at that. And then the communications tools. We know that this is a serious problem. We know that elected officials on water boards have a lot of trouble maintaining the political will necessary to approve unpopular rate increases. We need to help them with that. We need to help consumers understand the true issues involved. So we will be doing, throughout the rest of this year, a more detailed communications project. And we will have a lot of that finished by the end of the year. But we also want to document successful examples where conservation and the implementation of water efficiency programs has actually kept rates down. And one of the other publications you have in front of you is a publication we did in conjunction with Westminster, Colorado, because they've been doing conservation programs for about 30 years, and they kept very good records on what their avoided costs would have been had they not avoided them with conservation, and they were able to compute what their rates would have been without that conservation program. And there's an enormous difference. I mean, the rates would have been 80% higher, 80 to 90% higher. And so this is a document that explains that. And we'd love to add a couple of California examples and publish those as well. Because we don't want people to forget that water efficiency is a good long-term investment that reduces ratepayer costs in the long term. And we can't lose sight of that in the short-term frenzy to stabilize revenues. And so that's what this project is all about, and we're going to be looking to document as many good examples of this as we can in the state of California. So if you have any further questions, there's my email and our phone number in Chicago. I do have a California cell phone number because I do spend a lot of time still in my house in Lake Arrowhead, so I'm still a California resident and voter. So I'm around quite a bit, and be happy to work with you on this going forward. So thank you for the opportunity to present this.
That's great. I hope you find some good candidates for the California example who've actually helped. We call that the dog that didn't bark story. That's important. Public Works in LA, I kept threatening, and I should have done it, to do a press release at the end of the year of all the things that didn't happen. That might have happened in earlier years, or might, and I regret not doing it, because it would have been a great record of success in terms of what didn't happen.
Yeah.
So. Questions, please.
I was reading the actually the executive director's report that was that just came out today, and it's on our website, and I see that we're going to be sending out a questionnaire to urban water agencies, and as to what kind of what their experience has been in meeting the governor's drought proclamation, and so, you know, in listening to what you've presented and in thinking about this, one question that I'm sure we will need to be asking is, have you had any financial repercussions from meeting the governor's drought proclamation? Are there other areas in the area of risk assessment, or are there other specific things that we can ask urban agencies to provide us? We'll be doing this very quickly. We need to get the responses back June the 6th. And so this is a real-time question to you. And so if you've got some questions that you think we should be asking that will help to guide us as we move forward as a state in working with water agencies to help move them both regulatorily as well as financially toward something that is more sound. So what, in addition to the financial impact that people may be feeling by through this drought, what other questions can you recommend?
Do you want to?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
I think Mary Ann's looking to me. Well, I would be interested in querying them about their reserve policies and whether or not they had explicitly built into their reserves policies contingencies for conditions like we are in today. So it would be interesting when you got your survey sample back to see what differences you saw across utilities in terms of how they felt their reserves were or were not adequate to weather the current situation they're in. I would also be interested in asking them questions about how they view their public outreach, their conservation, and their curtailment policies as being or not being integrated with their revenue and their rate policies. I've seen it both ways in utilities in California. Some are tightly integrated. Others are disconnected. It usually does not go as well for those systems where there are disconnected policies. They usually end up in a situation where they are in a backlash environment, where they ask for a curtailment, they get the curtailment, and then they raise their rates because they have insufficient revenue. Whereas those utilities that do it in a more integrated way and educate their customers along the way usually go through that very public process and come out in better shape. So understanding the variability, the variation across utilities in terms of that integration would be very useful. And then being able to inform the sector on findings would be very helpful.
Thank you.
I would also add a question as to whether or not they are doing cost of service studies to justify the rates that they set. Because the adequate and accurate estimation of costs is one of the problems with the poor demand forecasting as well. So cost and demand have to be both analyzed correctly. So are they doing cost of service study on the costs, and what kinds of demand forecasting methods are they using? One of the factors we found is that the natural decline in demand coming from California's aggressive codes and standards were not being factored in by many water agencies in their long-term demand projections. So do they have a demand projection ability to include that and have their demand forecasts included that? So both the demand and the cost side. So we can write up some of these questions to you also.
Great. And one last question. I'm assuming from what you presented that there is no single rate structure that we should recommend, that it depends on the size and situation of the agency. But oftentimes, we do talk about a rate structure being the rate structure. Can you help either bring it into that conversation or confirm it?
Rate designs are context specific, and they need to tie back to the underlying system costs and usage patterns. If they don't, you won't provide good signal to your customers. You also run afoul of the Constitution.
And Prop 218.
So that's fundamental to any good rate design. I would say rather than there being an accepted design, there are accepted principles to rate design. And those principles are enumerated and illustrated in the guidebook that AWE is preparing and will have available in July. And it's important that rates adhere to those principles. They're long established. AWE has been at the forefront, I was going to say AWWA has been at the forefront of developing and maintaining these principles. But they're not always followed. And it's usually the utilities that don't do a good job at following the basic principles of cost of service and design that run into trouble.
That's interesting. Other questions? No? I have a couple, two somewhat generic and one more specific. And I should know the answer to this question. I could just ask Fran. I'll know she'll ask. She'll know the answer to this question. But for people listening, perhaps they're curious too. I know it's not all about California, but given your history and expertise and now having the more national look, where is California relative to other states, particularly in the arid Southwest, in terms of urban water conservation?
Well, it's an interesting question, and we did take a very comprehensive look at that. We did a state water efficiency scorecard. And there we looked at the water efficiency programs in all 50 states. We asked a standardized set of 20 questions of all of the states. California and Texas emerged as the only two states with an A- score. That's the highest score that anybody got. California edges out Texas a little bit, but those are the two states that had the most in the way of adopted, legislated, and regulatory policy. So California clearly stands out. And as we know, California is a leader in many ways. What happens in California ripples across the country. We know this.
But
and-
not in all areas of water. That's why I felt I needed to ask the question rather than assume it.
Yeah. In water efficiency, it's true. California is a definite leader. More water suppliers in California do efficiency programs as a percentage than in any of the other states. So the implementation is stronger in California. And you have the only target in the country. The 20 by 2020 target is the only performance target on efficiency that's been adopted in a formal legislated way in the country. So you are leaders in that regard.
And then how about in terms of conservation pricing, or however you want to, what's the term of art for rate structures that encourage conservation?
I mean, what are they called? Conservation-oriented rate structure?
Yeah. I mean, do we lead in that as well in terms of, not as a
Yes.
state, but in terms of individual agencies relative to other states?
There was an American Water Works Association Research Foundation report on water budget-based rate structures, and I think they inventoried 28 examples across the country, and I think maybe 25 of them were from California. So yes, California does lead the country in terms of its interest in taking a look at conservation pricing structures. The University of North Carolina has an environmental finance center that is also developing some alternative rate designs that they're trying out in North Carolina. So we'll see what happens from that result there. But I think California right now is particularly ripe for a real discussion of these issues because of the drought. You know, drought is a stressor, not just on water systems, but on financial systems. And so this is an opportunity, I think, to try some good analysis and experimentation here. I want to reinforce David's answer about there is no one answer for a water agency. They have to go through the process and come up with the answer that's best for them. But I think the handbook steps them through logical outcomes as well, so they will have some good guidance to follow.
And then one final specific, thank you for that. One final specific question, and I think you alluded to this in one of the answers, but a more concrete one. You know, as Dee Dee mentioned, the human right to water issue is now state policy. How to implement it becomes the question, and obviously focusing on water quality is something we've done. I've talked to water managers who are trying to figure out how would they implement that. And in some cases, it's through appropriate lifeline rates to the extent that they can, which becomes an important pairing to a rate structure that, or a tiered structure that encourages conservation. And so I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit as for water agencies who are also figuring out how do we make sure that those with the least resources do get the water they need to protect their families.
That's an important policy consideration, and it's addressed in both the handbook and very specifically in the model.
Good.
The knee-jerk response usually is, well, let's assess a drought surcharge that goes on everybody's bill, and it's the same amount for every customer. And that may or may not, depending upon the affordability quotient in the community, that may not be the right response. And so what I think what David's built in the model gives an opportunity to analyze a number of different options for this and addresses specifically the affordability issue. You might want to. answer more about that.
Well, I would just say that within California, we have the special issue of Proposition 218
Right.
and whether or not lifeline rates are compatible with its provisions. So while block rate designs are compatible with 218 if designed correctly and showing a proper nexus to cost of service, it's not clear that establishing a lifeline for a subset of
Could work.
customers
Right.
would pass a 218 test. And that poses a special challenge to utilities that are public municipal utilities. Within the investor-owned utilities that are regulated by the California Public Utility Commission, lifeline rates are standard practice.
Great. Yeah, one of the utility managers that I talked to was thinking about block rates and a basic indoor need per person number as your basic cheap service, and then everything else would tier off it for your outdoor irrigation or more use within the home.
You can do that by setting a very low first tier. Depending on how wide that tier is, you do introduce more revenue variability into your rate structure. So they'll have to balance
Trade-off.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to take all that time. Well, thank you very much. Really
Thank you for
appreciate
having
you coming out and all the hard work you're doing. It's going to be important to many people across the state and the country. So,
And on June 17, we'll have the outcomes of that survey. So you should show up and find out what happened.
that'll be great. Thank you very much. We'll now just take a short 10-minute break, and I will try and keep it to 10-minute as a courtesy mid-morning break, and then we'll be back to our agenda.
I appreciate it. I just didn't know that you guys were going to do it. Very good.
You guys have all the water you need, right?
Well, we've been very much utilized. The system here believes we have all.
Or that you're entitled to all the water you need.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Right. Pretty close to where we were last year. Temporary emergency change. Outflows. Like much reduced. Yeah, I mean, I think we're good. The operators. So far, so good. We had a big worry was to get through frost. Almost did no frost.
I guess there are still.
How hard it is. So far, it's been a couple of them. Well, 10 days ago, so we need a week of good weather, which means I think more heat.
More heat.
I think they were looking at 75. Crank things up. And they got a week, 2 or 3 days of triples. It can be too hot. Too cold. that satisfying the chair's request.
Yeah, right,
Had enough drought.
Yeah. There is other work going on in this building. It's not all drought.
Calculating seems to work.
Yeah, I think
One of my regrets, chair of the Northwest Board, calculating bridge.
So I thought it would be good to just have us talk about the model. We're beta testing it now, we can make the model available to you in the beta testing phase, but it's, as David said, we've already started to apply it to some model changes. It's just been positive results, that we're able to make decisions and
Argue
able to,
their
you
case.
know,
The issue is
because to say you can't afford conservation is like,
2 10-gallon buckets of
because
water.
long-term use is definitely how the we can't afford non-conservation.
there's more to it.
They were fighting over who got,
Oh, that's what they were fighting over?
well, I mean, in the end, the quantity.
Oh my God, it killed me. I mean, it was a tie-breaking vote on their rate structure at $15 a unit in the top tier. I didn't last long. You know, I didn't, I mean, it's tough, but it worked. I think they only take out 1% of the residential state water pressure. I still have some. Mine, you know, my neighborhood was
I regret
Living in between the contract? Oh, that's tough. It's hard, then it's a lot of finger pointing. If you want to know the next chapter, the state board upheld the fund. They would probably sue by the contract. Caltrans did not sue.
on that.
This is part of this message.
I mean, that was many years ago.
Oh,
Then there's
no,
more,
there's more like a half.
Did such a
yeah,
poor job
there's
of
more
educating.
current.
Yeah, that's right. No, you're right.
And it's better in California than it is here.
How's that work?
I mean, it's just, it's not there.
I'm surprised California scored so high, because, you know,
Just write a check. Yeah.
well, that's okay, I'll come back.
The relationship, I think, back
But they did adopt it. They have a per capita requirement. So this scorecard is really the most really adopted.
Yeah, so we look at guys on
they pay. What I hear from our staff, it's still a lot of work.
Spread is a Texas score.
That surprises me too.
But they have a lot of stuff.
Like on our water rights, no requirements. For them to report how much they do and what they are. So that can be determined. I don't know how.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
And Karen is working on the survey.
Okay.
So she's taking out.
I was introducing Diana.
Oh, good.
Some of the water districts in the district.
Oh, perfect.
We're gonna go watch them blow up a hydrant.
Oh, really?
And then next week. In Torrance, we're in Torrance.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand.
I don't know. I've never been to. Really? And I promise, you know, we're here to learn, really appreciate it.
That's great.
I had to put that in
That's
an
on
email.
Thursday.
Yeah, I'll stay. I'll make sure I get the information. It's at 9 o'clock in
And
the
then
morning.
next week, we're doing it in Sacramento.
Right, on the 29th.
I don't know, that's what I'll look on my calendar and see. That's on my radar.
That'd be great. I can even pick you up at your house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we're trying to develop a coalition behind this permit. One water district employee at a time. It's slow going. But it's good.
Oh. Right. Janine? All right. We are back. We almost made it, but not quite. It is 10:45, and we will resume with item number 6. Mr. Howard.
Thank you. The staff provides an update on the drought emergency at each board meeting, and John O'Hagan will describe some of our activities.
Good morning.
Good morning, John. Know you've been busy.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to give you a quick update on our curtailment notices that we've issued and then curtailment statuses in the state. First off, for the Scott River in the Siskiyou County, in that watershed, water diversions from the Scott River have been adjudicated and prioritized in the Siskiyou County Superior Court Decree number 30662. So these are adjudicated rights that we're talking about. Back in January 22nd, 2014, the State Board issued a notice to junior water right holders in this watershed of the potential for curtailment of their junior water rights by April 1st, 2014. In the decree, surplus class rights and post-1914 water rights are subject to other senior water rights determined upon the flow registered at the Fort Jones gauge, a USGS gauging station. Staff monitored the flows of the Scott River, and on May 16, 2014, the executive director of the State Water Board issued a notice of curtailment to the junior water right holders instructing them to cease and desist from diverting water under their junior water right classifications. Many of these parties have senior water rights as well as their junior water rights. In total, 212 junior water rights received the curtailment, and those were held by about 141 parties. Each diverter is requested to submit a compliance certification form to the State Water Board identifying whether they have completely ceased and desist from diverting water, whether they're using an alternate supply like groundwater or their senior water rights, or whether they have some emergency continued need for health and safety needs. State Water Board staff will be conducting compliance inspections in the near future to make sure that the parties comply with the notice order. Curtailment notices that are pending status, which means that they could be issued at any time based on our analysis. In the Upper Russian River watershed in Mendocino County, we are monitoring the storage changes at Lake Mendocino, which is the major reservoir supply in the upper watershed. And that is currently still has a slight increase in storage on a daily basis. It is likely that those storage levels will begin to drop, and the storage increases are mostly due to the Eel River input water, imported water from the Eel River system. Current staff analysis indicates that curtailment of certain post-14 water rights with a priority date later than 1954, located upstream of Healdsburg, is pending. So those would be possible issues of curtailment at any time based on our analysis. After June 1st, there may be insufficient natural flows to sustain surface diversions by riparian rights in the watershed upstream of the confluence of Dry Creek. Staff continues to monitor the lower portion of the Russian River, and at this time we have no recommendations for potential curtailment. In the Sacramento-San Joaquin watershed, basin-wide, in the reservoir conditions on the Sacramento side, Shasta, Trinity, Oroville, and now Folsom are all now releasing stored water. On the San Joaquin River side, New Melones, New Hogan, Buchanan, New Don Pedro, and Hidden dams are releasing storage based on the data we see today. Friant Dam and New Exchequer Dam on the Merced River appear to still be collecting storage. Our analysis shows that based on prior right demands, that curtailment of all post-14 water rights in the Sacramento-San Joaquin basin-wide watershed could be pending at this time. Several groups have contacted the State Water Board regarding agreements that they have reached amongst senior water right holders, especially in the San Joaquin River and then on the Yuba River. They are recommending that curtailment would not serve any beneficial purpose to protecting their senior water rights, and that their conservation efforts have reduced their demands, and they feel that a curtailment at this time would not benefit any parties. They also are questioning some of our data for our demand, which, as you recall, is from the online reporting system. Some of that data I'm having staff look at to see the comments that we received. We've provided that data to these stakeholders, and they have provided us comments back. On the Tulare Lake Basin, which includes Kings River, Kaweah River, Kern River, and Tule River, it appears that our analysis based on demand would support a curtailment of all post-14 water rights at this time also. However, we've been contacted by all the water masters on those watersheds, and they have historically operated and maintained the flows in the river to satisfy prior rights, and they also suggest that curtailment would serve no purpose at this time. They feel that their operation is satisfying the downstream prior right demands, and then the curtailment of the smaller upstream diverters would not benefit their prior right holders. We are seeking comments from these water masters regarding whether their regulation of diversions ensures that there is no unreasonable effect on in-stream uses. We're awaiting that response, and that finishes my presentation on pending statuses of our curtailments and then the curtailment that has been issued.
I know we'll be talking about this issue on some of our other agenda items, but any questions at this
Yeah,
point
just a
now?
quick one. In situations where you're waiting to either hear back from a party that is suggesting a different approach, or you have all the information, could you talk a little bit about timing? So if you determine in a certain watershed that it's the appropriate time to issue a curtailment notice, how much time does it take for you to review these agreements and respond in such a way that either way it wouldn't make much of a difference in terms of the protection? Lost time.
Oh, due to the discussing the agreements, yeah.
Yeah.
The discussions that we've had, they've submitted their letters, and we're reviewing those letters. Again, there's some information that we do not see in the agreements. It appears that all the water on the San Joaquin side, for example, would be used up by water right holders. So that's one of the questions we have. And then some of the water that is being released from storage is, the question we would have is whether that needs to be protected in any way.
Right, but my question more has to do with how do you deal with these issues in a timely fashion? So let's say you determine that on a certain watershed, a curtailment, but for these agreements, a curtailment should be issued on, say, the 20th. And in the meantime, you have a request. How much time do you think it would take to go through those requests so that, well, I'm not giving a very good example because today's the 20th. Let's say that it's on the 28th. You have a request in hand. Will you be able to review those so that you can make a decision whether it's the agreement route or a curtailment by the date that you think a curtailment should have been issued, say, on the 28th?
Perhaps I should interject a comment. What we are seeing to date, I think, are not detailed technical analyses of the effect on fish and wildlife and the effect on other legal users of water. So, what we're sort of looking for is at least a prima facie case that, that fish and wildlife will be protected and that there won't be any effect on legal users of water. From what I've seen of what's been submitted, I can make that determination in half an hour, since there's not really a lot of information, at least so far, that's been submitted. And so I'll read these and see what I would suggest or what I will recommend, I guess, as soon as they're sent to us. But I did want to update the board members to know, though, that starting immediately after tomorrow's workshop, unless we receive direction to the contrary, we will be sending out curtailment notices for the post-1954 Russian River diverters above Healdsburg, and we will also start sending out notices for various areas within the Sacramento Basin by as early as the close of business tomorrow, certainly by the next day. But we wanted the board members to first hear the comments from the stakeholders on the alternatives for curtailment and give any direction that they want to provide at that point before we commence. So as we stand right now, getting back to your question, we had two letters. I met with one from Yuba County and one from the San Joaquin folks. I met with both of those parties, described the type of information I thought we would need. I was out yesterday, but I don't think we've received any additional information. Based on the information that's been submitted to date, I would move forward with curtailments on both of those watersheds. But they know the kind of information that we've asked for, and we will look for any further information they provide us.
What time, did you give them a time frame to
Well,
get back
at
to
the
you?
time, they
or-
said they'd get back within a day or two, as I
Okay.
recall. But like I say, we haven't seen anything, and I met with them on Thursday.
Just other questions? I just have one. I'm just aware of one watershed, the Scott, where we had gotten a request to do curtailments. Do you have any other areas where people, senior water rights holders or environmental interests or downstream use, whatever, where people are asking us to implement curtailments faster than we're going? I know it's our job to administer it. We don't wait for a request. I'm just curious.
I don't know of any specific watershed that we've actually received requests for doing curtailments. We do have some individual complaints that we've received against competing parties, but not curtailment of all upstream parties above them.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Interesting. People may be just waiting for what we do or assuming that we're going to implement. So.
I know they can speak for themselves when they're here tomorrow on this, but I thought NACWA was requesting that we go forward on curtailments in the Sacramento.
Maybe. Okay. Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions, Mr. Howard. Oh, wait, I have a card. Yes. Is this for item 6? It is, Mr. O'Loughlin. Sorry.
Sorry for the lateness in filing. Oh, sorry. Tim O'Loughlin, representing the San Joaquin Tributaries Authority. Didn't understand that this agenda item was going to come up in the fashion that it did. Sorry for the late filing of the comment card. I think you need a little more context here about what's been going on and why you've gotten letters and where we see things. Clearly, there is no doubt, and we've been meeting with your staff pretty extensively with Mr. O'Hagan, more so than most others. So coming out of the meetings with Mr. O'Hagan, the concept or idea is that we were looking at a strictly water right priority implementation on the San Joaquin River system. So it was kind of like Water Rights 101. Take the priorities, see what water is available, cut people from top to bottom, and we're done. So based on those discussions, I got together with other parties in the San Joaquin system, and you have received a letter. And the letter basically said that based on for current operations and operations that are planned going forward at the upstream tributaries and the upstream reservoirs as well, both on the Friant side and the Exchange side, as well as the 3 major tribs, plus the granting of the temporary urgency change petition that you just did for New Maloney's, we looked at things, and the parties agreed that there would be no impact on senior water rights or water right diversions caused by those operations moving forward. Okay? And that's an important point. So, and people realize that there's a drought and there's going to be cutbacks, and they're not going to get all the water that they normally get, but based on a water right priority analysis, those needs were going to be met. We saw no reason for curtailment in the San Joaquin River Basin. So then we had a meeting with your staff last week, and we had a little change in direction. So in regards to the first part, your staff said that we had to show and provide them with the data that there would be no unreasonable impact on other legal users of water. So I'm going to maybe speak out of turn, and since Mr. O'Hagan's here, you can ask him about it, whether or not it's true. The tribs have provided extensive data to your staff on exactly this point. So they have all of our records, they have all of our diversions, they have all of our operations. We've had a long discussion about what this looks like going forward. So on a strictly water right priority basis, I think we're pretty good, okay? And that's why we sent the letter. Now, last week in the discussions with your staff, and since Mr. Howard's here, he can correct me if I misstate or paraphrase your statements incorrectly. The shift came, and now the request is unreasonable impacts on fish and wildlife. Well, that's a new one. So that discussion has several talking points. So if you allow me to take up just a couple more minutes of your
A
time.
little bit. I suspect this will be a big part of the discussion
Yeah, and it's an
this
important
afternoon
point.
and tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
For the San Joaquin River Basin, the State Water Resources Control Board in D1641 adopted flow objectives for fish and wildlife. That's Table 3. That has been in effect since 1995. You have stated in your order that the United States Bureau of Reclamation from New Melones is solely responsible for meeting that flow objective, both from direct diversions and from storage. Now, we pointed out to you when you granted the TUCP that this very issue that we're talking about now was going to come into play. But you, in your discretion, decided to grant the temporary urgency change petition. So what's going to happen on June 1 is the following. On June 1, the United States Bureau of Reclamation is going to release 150 CFS of water from the Stanislaus River. That water is pursuant to Table 2E, which you said that they could operate to as part of the temporary urgency change petition. The Tuolumne is going to be releasing about 100. The Merced's going to be releasing about 50. Okay? The requirement for flow at Vernalis is 710 CFS during the month of June. Okay? So you've let the most junior water right diverter, and in fact, the only party responsible for meeting that flow objective, off the hook. Now, that decision's come and gone, and we may fight about that another day, but when you did that, you said no other legal user of water or senior water right was going to be impacted. So now, if the discussion, so from my perspective, is, well, wait a second. If we're short 3 or 4 or 500 CFS at Vernalis because of a temporary urgency change petition, and we've met all of our senior water rights, then why am I on the hook now for fish and wildlife use? Then the part 2 of our discussion with your staff is, well, wait, you've gone through a water quality control plan in D1641. You went through it again in 2005, 2006. You identified no other flow requirements for fish and wildlife protection in your plan. So how do we know what those are? And you're going to hear this more later. We'll probably, this will get boring after a while.
I'm just letting you do a short preview, but
yeah,
knowing that this is actually on the agenda later, I don't want to
tease.
spend a lot of time.
No,
but it's
we're going to be done in just 1 second.
Yeah.
It's kind of a tease. But so then the question is, if you have, so I asked Tom, what information do we provide you? What protected species are we looking at? How, where, when, why, and how? I'd love to give you information. We got our biologists, but I don't know what it is because I don't know what the objective is. So that's a tough one. So that's where we are with why we haven't responded further, because we don't know what to do on how to respond. So thank you for your time.
helpful. No,
and
thank
we'll be
you.
hearing more from each other on the next
No,
couple hours.
helpful framing.
Thank you.
Great. Item number 7.
Well, the Delta Water Master will now provide his report on Delta conditions. Craig Wilson will be, the Delta Water Master will be.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here today to give you a brief update on Delta Water Master issues. The first topic, if I can get this up. These are the topics that I'll be covering. I'm not going to speak directly on drought-related activities. You've just had an update on that. And while I've spent a fair amount of time working on drought stuff is basically more in a support role, offering advice and counsel here and there. You've got a great staff that's been working on various items from, you know, upper management to middle management to the staff level. So my topics will be related more to things within the statutory authority of the Delta Water Master. These first few slides that I'm going to present are kind of dealing with kind of my underlying theme of the Delta Water Master's authority of providing more certainty regarding what's going on in the Delta, how many people are diverting water, where they are, how much water is being diverted, the certainty of the water rights. You've seen this slide before. I think the biggest takeaway from this slide is to see that the vast majority of water right claims in the legal delta are not permittees and licensees of the state board, but are rather people that hold riparian rights and pre-14 rights, which is, you know that, but I just wanted to emphasize that. The vehicle that we really use to provide this certainty and information about water use in the delta is the reporting requirements by both permittees and licensees and people subject to the statements of water diversion and use program. And I put up the stats for the last reporting cycle that was completed, the 2012, and you can see as of about 2,000 or so people that were subject to the reporting requirements. All but 6 have filed statements. 5 of those 6, I believe, are been referred to the Attorney Generals, and we're still working with one and may finally get that. I'd want to give a shout out to Grammy Sachow of our staff. That old saying about the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they always get their man. Well, Grammy always gets her diverter who fails to file her statement or reporting requirement. I also threw up the chart for the 2013 reporting year. Those reports are not due until July 1st of this year, and you can see the stats are quite a bit lower, but that's pretty typical. People wait to the last minute to file those types of statements. The next thing I would talk about, and again, it's on this theme of providing more certainty in the delta, and I talked about this a little bit during my last update, is that we've developed this interactive water rights map of the legal delta, and it's on the board's website under the Delta Water Master icon, and it's really a pretty interesting thing where you can click on the various links and get a map of the entire delta showing every diversion, all the maps. You can click on individual islands and tracts, get information and narrative summaries. Just an example of how that works. I just singled out this one particular tract. The blue dots are people that have riparian and pre-1914 and have filed statements. The red dot is the permittee or license, and the various islands differ. And you can click on any one of those dots, which is a diversion point, and it'll call up the reports and the information about the particular diverter, how much water they're diverting, when they started diverting. So it's, again, provides a lot of certainty. We actually have 4 different screenshots that you can look at the various islands. Here's one that just is a topographical view. And like I said, we also have narrative summaries. This is a very brief one because I wanted to get it on one slide, but some of the summaries go on for several pages. We probably have about 2/3 of those done now, and they're again can be linked when you go to the various islands. So it gives you a good picture of what's going on in the delta. Okay, switching gears a little bit, Term 91. That's really the more traditional or earliest curtailment that the board has